Are these 2022 romance novels worth your time? Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Now for today's video, I'm doing a review of all the 2022 contemporary romances that I have read recently. I wanted to give this video kind of like an introduction to contemporary romance and to also help people decide what they should read next. So these are all going to be very honest reviews, like the reviews that you always see on my channel. So the first book that I do want to talk about is this one from Amy Leah or Lay. She is a debut Canadian author and she is a friend of mine on Bookstagram. So when I heard that she had a publishing deal with Berkeley Romance, I was super excited for her and I definitely wanted to read her debut novel called Set on You. Now this one is really interesting. It follows our hero who is actually a firefighter, but he was inspired by Chris Evans, and that is just one of the main selling points for any romance novels for me if the characters are described to look like one of my favorite celebrity crushes. Now, our heroine, if I remember correctly, is like Chinese American, or she is at least Chinese ethnicity, and she is curvier than other Asian girls in her community. She is also a fitness influencer. She focuses a lot on her health and she focuses a lot on building muscle and just training and endurance and things like that. And she wants to be a very positive role model in the fitness community. They both meet in the gym when she realizes that he stole her favorite place to work out in the gym area, and then it starts off kind of like an enemies to lovers romance, but then it quickly turns into a kind of like friends to lover romance. It's a sweet romance novel involving the harmful effects of social media and what the community is saying and how negative and toxic it could be. This one, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I really thought that the storyline was very solid. I liked the character development. I liked the issues that were talked about in this book. I liked the diversification that they had in this book. And I just really liked the representation too as well. But overall, it was just kind of like a sweet, warm-hearted story. But I did want a little bit more to it to make me feel like I was fully captured, maybe just a little bit more angsty parts, but still would recommend you guys to check this one out. My sister is actually in the middle of reading this. She only has a couple of pages left and she loves it so far. I think it's going to be one of her favorite reads of this year. The next book that I want to talk about is this one called For the Love of the Bard by Jessica Martin. Now, I don't know if this is Jessica Martin's debut novel. It could very be. But this one, if you are a William Shakespeare fan, then you guys would know that this is very heavily influenced by William Shakespeare. It essentially involves our heroine who gets roped into becoming the director of these like plays that go on in this Shakespearean festival in the small town that she lives in. I think the town is actually called Bard, but I'm not too sure. And anyways, so she is paired up working with like a high school friend, high school acquaintance, and they don't really get off on the right foot when they first meet each other again after so many years. But then she realizes that he is a lot sweeter than he looks, even though he does tend to be quiet and reserved most of the time. It also involves our heroine dealing with a lot of things happening in her family life. So it does involve a lot of family issues, especially since her parents are aging now and her parents' family had a history of health issues that could potentially impact her mom and her dad, and of course herself in the future. So it does talk about some topics like that. I also really like this story because it involved our heroine kind of mending her relationship with her oldest sister, who is kind of like not really like the black sheep of the family, but she definitely stands out. Her older sister is described to be like an ice queen. She is an attorney and she works her way up the corporate ladder to become partner very earlier on in her career. So she's kind of cutthroat. She's very different from everybody else in the family who's a little bit more laid back. And it was really nice to kind of see that relationship kind of mend, because they were not always the closest, but there was like a lot of conversations between them that could help mend it. And I know I just said like they're like high school acquaintances between our main character and our hero, but I just remembered that it's not really high school acquaintances. Like they kind of had a crush on each other and they had plans to go to prom with each other, but then something happened and then it fell through. So now they're down to being acquaintances. Overall, I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. I thought that the storyline could have definitely been a little bit more in terms of the romance. It focused a lot of like the family issues, which I didn't mind, but it was just kind of slow in some parts and I was just kind of waiting for more things to happen. But it was definitely a very high 3 out of 5 stars, and I would recommend you to check this one out if you guys are in for an emotional ride involving family issues. The next book that I picked up is Starry Eyed Love by Helena Hunting. Now this is book number 2 in this series that she has with St. Martin's Press, and it essentially follows like the 3 sisters who own this family business together. They run it together, and our heroine is not really up for a relationship because she just broke up with her boyfriend, and then she was at the bar with her sisters talking about how she wants to be a strong independent woman and she doesn't want to be in a relationship anymore. And then some guy who is like really attractive walks up to her and hits on her, and she respectfully declines. But then fast forward a couple months later, when her family business needs the help of a different company, in walks that same person that hit on her, and now she feels completely embarrassed because like they were never supposed to see each other again, but here they are working together in this like business partnership. And it's kind of a little bit sad and awkward because our heroine is attracted to him, but then he doesn't seem like he's attracted to her anymore, and it seems like it's one-sided love and unrequited love. But essentially this book, I gave it, I think, around a 3.5 out of 5 stars or 3 out of 5 stars. I liked it. I enjoyed it. But then at the same time, I knew that the hero liked her, but I just always felt that our heroine liked him more. So it came off a little bit desperate in the sense, and I don't think that that was what the author was intending to do with this romance novel. So I'm curious about the first book to see if it's better than this one, and of course I'm going to keep my eye out for the third book in this series too as well. The next book that I want to talk about is this one called From Bad to Curse by Lana Harper. Now she wrote this book called Payback's a Witch, and I read that one last year. I really enjoyed it. It was like fall atmospherical, like, you know, it was the witchy read that everybody was kind of like craving in the fall months. So I don't know why, but they decided to publish this one in the spring summer season, which is weird to me because I would think that it would do better in the fall season. But nonetheless, I still read it and I really enjoyed it. So it involves our heroine, who is basically a costume designer, and that's her main thing that she is really proud of and that she really enjoys. But of course her family business always tends to come first, and essentially they have this like festival going on, and then somebody is harming other witches, and then now she is tasked to go on this investigation to figure out who could be possibly villainizing the town that they live in and who could be harming potential witches. And she has to work with our hero, who is very dark and mysterious, and he is no nonsensical, and they are just kind of very different from each other, but they decide to work with each other anyways. And they are both from different sides of like the witch family, which is kind of like a Romeo and Juliet situation because both families really despise each other and they don't trust each other. So it's kind of like a forbidden romance. I really enjoyed it, but I definitely thought that there were some parts where it could have been a little bit more romantic. I felt like we were diving deeper into the mystery aspect of the book instead of the romance, but it was still fun. It was still enjoyable. I think I gave this one maybe like a 3.5 out of 5 stars or a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I did pick up is this one called Dream On by Angie Hockman. Now, Angie Hockman wrote Shipped, and I read Shipped last year. Shipped is essentially about 2 characters who work in the same agency as together, but then they're both tasked to go on this vacation together so that they can write like a blog post about it or something, and then whoever writes the best one and gets like the most attention can keep their jobs or something like that. So it's kind of like the hating game. So I didn't really like that one. I just don't like the hating game anyway, so I just didn't buy into it. But I read Dream On and I really enjoyed it. So it essentially involves our heroine who just woke up from a coma and she has like no idea what happened in the past 2 years or so of her life. Essentially, our heroine had vivid memories of this man and falling in love with this like man. And she tells her parents, she tells her friends, she tells her family that like she was in this really long-term relationship, and everybody's freaked out because like they're telling her, no, you haven't. You were like literally single. So she is an excellent artist. So she draws pictures of him and she remembers his face vividly. And so she decides to kind of like leave it to be. And she just chalks it up to her having very vivid memories when she was in a coma. Until one day she walks down the street and then she bumps into a guy who like is coming out of the flower shop. And that's when she realizes that that's the guy in her coma. She and him kind of work together to try to piece together what exactly happened, and they think it's like a fate situation and that it's probably like something like supernatural. So they decide to go on dates and they decide to get to know each other. But the one thing is that there is a brother involved in this situation that is kind of preventing her from falling in love with our hero, because our hero's brother is always in the way. And it's a good time. Like, I really enjoyed this novel. I thought it was like super interesting. I thought it was super entertaining. I thought it was like really romantic in a sense. It definitely reminded me of books from Rebecca Shirley, you know, like the novel In 5 Years. And it definitely reminded me of Josie Silver too, with her book called Two Lives of Lydia Bird. So the next book that I did pick up is this one called The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. Now, I've seen a lot of people talk about this book on Bookstagram, and I also saw it on Amazon a lot in like the front pages, but I never really heard much about it. It's the Good Morning America Book Club pick, so I just assumed that it was going to be a really popular novel. And I know that like publishers probably tend to pay a lot of money to get into like these book clubs, but nonetheless, I tried it out and I'm so glad I did, because I really, really did enjoy this book. This book is probably easily going to be in my best books of 2022 this year. So it essentially follows our heroine, who is a ghostwriter for a very popular romance author, and she is kind of in a slump because she got out of a really difficult relationship and now she no longer believes in love, and that's really hard for her because she is a romance author, and now how is she going to write a romance novel when she doesn't even believe in love in the first place? So she kind of wrote herself into this wall, and she wants to go tell the editor that she needs more time. And when she goes to meet her editor, who is our hero, you know, they kind of butt heads. It's kind of like a difficult situation because our editor knows that like she needs to meet the deadline, so he can't really do much about it. So she is, you know, sad and she's depressed. And, you know, when it rains, it pours. And what essentially happens is that her family calls her and tells her that she needs to go back to her small town that she grew up in because something tragic has actually happened to her father, and her father has actually passed away, and now she needs to be there to take care of like the will and to take care of the family, and then also to, you know, attend the funeral and also help with the funeral. So she goes back to the small town, and this book focuses a lot on grief handling and also how like the family's reacting to it. It's dark at some levels because somebody did die, but it's also lighthearted because like the family members kind of like react to grief in all different ways, and it's not like the whole sad, depressing storyline that you think it would be. But there's a little secret that she's holding on to, and that secret is that she can actually see dead people. She can see ghosts. So to her shock, when she opens the door one day, she sees her editor, and her editor has actually passed away. And now they are both in this journey together of kind of like handling grief and taking care of everything and kind of putting up like a funeral for her father. I really like this one. It was super romantic. It got into the dark and the gritty, and I just really liked our hero. Our hero is the type of guy who is quiet, reserved, and stoic, but he's like a sweetheart inside, and he only shows like his true emotions to her when he is very comfortable around the people. And it was just adorable. I gave this one like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I think it took a half star off because in the beginning it was just kind of hard to go through because I don't really like reading about. The next book that I did pick up is this one called American Royalty by Tracy Livesay. I think that's how you pronounce her last name, but I apologize if I did pronounce it wrong. It essentially involves a female rapper slash singer who is very popular in the United States and globally too as well. But what essentially happens is that there are a lot of enemies in the music industry and that want to kind of drag her down so that they can step up. And what happens is that her reputation is essentially tarnished when a competitor says something really poorly about her. So she is kind of on the brink of losing like a brand deal and then also like losing, you know, a lot of money because she has a cosmetics company and she needs to promote it. So she decides to take up on the offer of performing at like one of these like European countries, like whole monarchy concert celebration year thing. And that's when she meets our prince, who is very, you know, rule following. He's strict. He's like completely different from her. And this is like an opposites attract romance. And it's involves our heroine also living in the same quarters and like the same house as him. If you guys really want a forced proximity like novel, then definitely pick this one up because they both have to live with each other until like the celebration is over, and that's where they kind of develop romantic feelings for each other. But definitely it was enemies to lovers first, then it turned to friends to lovers, and then obviously it turned to a blossoming romance. And it obviously also involves a lot of like talk about what he's expected to do and as a royal member, and then what she's expected to do too as well. And she knows that, you know, not everyone's going to be really accepting of her and her music and her personality. So there's a lot of issues involved with this book. I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars, mostly because it was like enemies to lovers, but then it turned into lust to lovers, because she was just like really attracted to him. And he was really attracted to her right from the start. I also didn't really like our heroine, mostly because she just felt like she was really rude in a lot of times. Like she did a lot of things that it was her fault, but then she would make it sound like that he's just being dramatic. Like there's instances where she makes a huge mess in his house and then was like, this is normal for me to do it. And I'm like, that's crazy to me because like if I were to ever go to someone's house and I made a huge mess, I would make sure that I would clean it up before the person comes back. I wouldn't even make the mess in the first place because I would just feel like it's not my house. Like, why am I doing this? Anyways, regardless, I still like this novel and I'm going to be looking out for more Tracy's novels too as well. So the next book that I did pick up is this one from Christina Lauren called Something Wilder. I know a lot of people already talked about this book and I was kind of putting it off for like the longest time, mostly because I don't know, like me and Christina Lauren are just kind of like, sometimes it's a hit, sometimes it's a miss. It essentially involves a second chance romance. Our heroine comes from like the ranch, from the farm life, and her father is very adventurous and loves to like solve mysteries and like find hidden treasures and things like that. Meanwhile, our hero, I think, comes from the city. So our hero kind of found a summer job and then they fell in love and then they promised that, you know, they're gonna go take the next step higher. They're gonna get engaged, they're gonna get married or whatever, but then he never comes back. So it left a really, really bitter taste in our heroine's mouth. So when she sees him again at the ranch that she works at, and it turns out that him and his buddies all booked like a weekend trip getaway at the ranch, and that she has to be the tour guide. She and him are kind of very awkward and stilted with each other. What they realized like 25% through in the book is that somebody actually has motives other than having a bachelor party, and that they're actually there to go find hidden buried treasure. And so it turns into this very adventurous romantic comedy novel where a group of people are trying to solve this mystery of trying to hunt for long lost gold and money. So overall, I enjoyed the novel, but it definitely leaned more towards like the adventurous side than the romantic side. It was fun. It was interesting to see them like find the money and to like beat the villains who were also trying to look for the money. But overall, the romance left something to be desired. So I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. Definitely will still be picking up Christina Lauren just because they have been major players in the romance field, and they are very talented at what they do. Their writing is always really good. The next book that I did pick up is this one called In a New York Minute by Kate Spencer. So I had the opportunity of going to New York in early July, and when I picked up this book again, it felt like I was transported back into New York City. I like New York City. It was just very crazy and hectic a lot of the time, so it was definitely nice to come back into, you know, like my quiet hometown setting. But it was really nice to revisit the same places that I went to in this book. So if you guys are missing New York City, definitely go pick this one up. It's essentially a romantic comedy involving our heroine who's stuck in a very, you know, not so great situation. She basically got let go from her company, and she is now left jobless, and she doesn't know what she wants to do with her life. And to make things worse, when she gets onto the subway, like the doors close on her dress and like rips like the back of her dress, and now she's kind of like showing off her underwear to the whole train. And in comes our hero, who saves the day by taking off his jacket and then giving it to her and covering her up. And then it becomes like this social media like sensation because somebody like recorded this thing happening, and then now everybody is in New York City is obsessed with this like couple, which is not really a couple, and they laugh it off. They think it's funny that they are getting popular media attention from it, but they don't like each other yet, and they're not in a relationship. Are they attracted to each other? Yes, but this book is a very natural romantic comedy. It involves our hero and heroine kind of rediscovering themselves and living their lives and, you know, being at a right place before they finally commit to a long-lasting relationship. So it was kind of nice to see our hero kind of date around different girls first before realizing that he had the strongest connection to our heroine, and then our heroine developing herself and growing stronger by herself and creating a new business for herself and being more confident in herself. So I really like this one because it was really funny. Like there was so many times in this book where I just kind of like laughed really hard because of the situations that were happening. It was just wacky. It was insane. It reminded me a lot like Sophie Kinsella's writing. So I enjoyed it. But overall, there were some problem areas in this book that I didn't really like. And there was just some instances where I felt that the story was dragging a little bit too long with the conflict. So I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I definitely will be picking up more of Kate Spencer's books when she publishes them. The next book that I read was this one called Dating Dr. Dill, and this one's from Nisha Sharma. Now, Nisha Sharma is not a new author. I've read her before. Unfortunately, her previous books I didn't really like because of the characterizations, because of what the characters actually did in those novels. So I was kind of excited to read Dating Dr. Dill, mostly because I saw really great reviews from my close friends. So I expected a lot when I entered this novel, but overall it just wasn't for me. So it essentially involves our heroine, who is a lawyer. She's doing really well for herself, but she is still dealing with the grief of losing her mom, which is really sad. It's very disappointing. But her family has kind of like packed up their grief and kind of dealt with it because it's been a long time. And essentially her father now wants to sell the family house, and she's really upset by it because she always knew that her mom really loved the house and that her mom really thought that like this house would be passed on down to family members and to like the sisters and things like that. So she actually offers to buy the house from her father, but her father is like, with the housing market right now, I can get way more money than what you're offering. So I'm sorry, like I am literally going to just sell this house. So she and her father have an agreement because she's like a little bit on the older side, like not older, like 30s, but she's like in her late 20s, early 30s side, definitely older for South Asian families. But she hasn't started dating yet. She's not in a marriage, or she doesn't have any prospects for a marriage yet. So her father and her agree that she's going to go on dates so that she can at least have that opportunity for marriage. And then if she gets a marriage proposal, then she can get the house. So she's kind of going on a lot of dates. She's using a dating app. She's trying to meet a lot of guys, but there's a lot of duds right now, and she can't find a proper human being until she goes on a show with like our main hero. And then our main hero and her kind of had a connection before, but then something soured, and then now it's kind of like a second chance romance where they get to meet each other again. She and him are just like oil and water, and they don't get along. And basically on live television something happened, and then now he is losing all of his reputation and that he really needs to save it. So he and her plot to enter a fake dating relationship so that they can both get what they want. For him, he wants more funding for his, I think, like organization, and she wants to go into a relationship so that she can hopefully get the house. So overall, 2 out of 5 stars. I don't know what to say. I just don't like the story. I don't like fake dating. I didn't like the fact that our hero kept calling his like private anatomy like a certain name for no reason. I didn't like how everybody was treating our heroine like she was like a child when she was a fully grown adult with a really reputable profession. I didn't like how our heroine was always jumping to conclusions too as well. It just sounded a little bit whiny from both sides. So ultimately gave this one a 2 out of 5 stars. Will I be checking out more Nisha Sharma books? Yes, I will. But I'll be kind of going in knowing that I might not like it. So the next book that I want to talk about is this one called Nora Goes Off Script. And this one is by Annabel Monagman. And now I don't have the physical copy of this book, but I've seen it trending on Bookstagram a lot. So I was kind of really curious about it. It is essentially about a older female character who is recently single. She's divorced and she has children. She's just trying to like make it as like a single mom, but definitely it's very difficult for her. She is a movie writer, so she essentially writes scripts for this television production company that is really similar to Hallmark. She writes Hallmark movies, and it's not something that she's like really passionate about doing, but she also loves doing it in the sense of just watching everything kind of come together in the end and seeing her final product on TV. Her husband was never supportive of her in her career and was always like kind of like just ragging on her, but she was the primary breadwinner, so she doesn't really understand the audacity and she doesn't know where he's getting it from. But essentially her husband cheats on her and then they decide to go get a divorce, and then in walks our new hero walking in, who just so happens to be the main lead actor in the movie that she just wrote. And he is extremely attractive and he comes off as kind of like a playboy, but then the more our heroine kind of gets to know him, the more she realizes that that's just kind of publicity and that the real him is someone very understanding, very philosophical, very caring, and very attentive, and is a perfect fit for her small family. So she's kind of like playing it by ear because she doesn't know if she wants to enter into a serious relationship after getting out of a serious relationship. So there's a lot of instances in this book where definitely her insecurities come out to play and where his fame also causes a lot of issues in the relationship. Overall, I thought it was a really realistic depiction of what could potentially happen in real life between two humans who come from two very different backgrounds. And I really enjoyed our hero because he was just a sweetheart with the children. And ultimately, it was a good story. I liked it. So I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. So anyways, I think that is it for all the books that I have read recently that were published in 2022. So hopefully you have more books to put towards your TBR, maybe move some books up your TBR list or just kind of move some books down. But hopefully this video was somewhat helpful and you guys enjoyed this. I'll see you guys again next time in a new video. Bye.